Here. Okay, can we have any public comment for items that are on the agenda? You want them to talk now, or?
No, I thought here.
No, I have nothing on the agenda.
Oh.
I'll volunteer.
Oh.
Christine David, resident of Atherton. I am Lane Council. Nice to see you. I understand that today the town council is considering whether or not to add in the ad alternate of new council chambers. And I just wanted to offer a few financial theories that might help you, and if you're considering putting it off until later, or you consider doing it now. If you do it now, you probably save a lot more money because of the economies of scale. If you put it off till later, it would cost a little bit more money. If you put it off till later, there's also financial future value of the dollar would tell you that, as we know, the cost of creating the new town council chambers would be a lot more expensive than if you did it now in the master plan with the entire project. Also, the council chambers are important to the residents because it's one of the only community spaces left. And a lot of the times, the council was talking about the use of community spaces for the residents. And because we've had to kind of pare back our square footage, the only community space I think that's left is the council chambers as a multi-use, multi-function facility. So that's one thing that residents are hopeful will still exist. And if not, the only community space would be the outdoor areas. And lastly, if you're considering doing it later, I think it might be somewhat of a hardship for the homeowners that are around the area because of the massive construction that we're already allowing us to do. So I would just hope that you would consider that in your decision. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll close public comments and we'll go to item number 1.
Okay, at this time, I think I have to recuse myself because of proximity to the project.
Okay, and it just started raining for you.
I really appreciate that. And then will George Street, will somebody text me? Okay, I'll call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is the action item for the evening, the award of the Civic Center project of the lowest responsive bidder. And then there's a series of other items underneath it to start moving down into the construction phase. Those have to deal with the move costs for staff located in the temporary facilities, the management contract for InnoWest Consulting, and the phasing for the next phase of the contract for WRNS. Those are just the highlights. Marty has all the details. He's the expert in the room. So I'm going to turn it over to Marty if he has anything further to say on it. But you could do them one at a time or do them as a group. It's all up to you.
I don't know, Mayor, how do you want to handle it?
Why don't we go ahead and talk about the contract, introduce the contract?
Yeah, I'd like to just do a little brief overview of what happened the last week. As you were at the bid opening, Mayor, and Councilmember Lewis was, is a historic day that we got the bids in. As you know, the engineer's estimate was $48.5 million. After all the value engineering, all the great work that City Council did and directed staff to do. And we had 4 bids come in, as noted in your staff report. And we had 3 bids in the $44 million range and 1 in the $55 million range. And $44,177,000 was provided by S.J. Amoroso Construction, and they were deemed the lowest responsive bidder. And as items number 1 and 2 highlight in your staff report, staff is recommending that council award them the construction project. Before we go into that, I'd like to introduce you to the president of S.J. Amoroso, and Bob
Erskine, yes.
Erskine, would you say a few words?
Yeah, so my name is Bob Erskine. I'm the president of SJ Amoroso. I've been with the company for about 21 years. And our chief estimator, Jim Benson, who's led this project, has been with the company about 25 years. Across our company, most of our employees have been with us either their entire career or the majority of their career. We're headquartered about 6 miles from here in Redwood Shores, and really excited about the project. It was one we originally toured about a year ago and have followed it, and really gave a best efforts to make sure we hit it hard. We have built some monument libraries around the state. CSU Monterey Bay, City of Alameda, City of Santa Clara, CSU King Library, and some historic landmarks, Griffith Park Observatory, some really landmark projects. So we're excited to be part of your team. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the alternate as well, which we spoke briefly about. We do a lot of projects that have alternates that have different triggers throughout the contract. This one in particular is locked for 90 days from the time of submission. We certainly would encourage any type of these alternates, or even if it's not an alternate, but a significant concern with the project, to introduce it as quickly as we can. We also have many subcontractors that are tied in to that alternate, and their proposals also are only good for those 90 days. And we'd like to build it into our overall plan, our overall schedule, and really execute that and minimize any disruption to the local community as well. So we certainly, again, want to reiterate, we're excited and happy to be part of the team.
Any questions for?
I just want to thank both of you and your cost estimator, because cost estimates have been a little bit tricky these days. So I do appreciate the fact that you seem to be a little bit more on target than some of the previous bids. But thank both of you guys for, and being so close also is good. I was a little concerned on the distance of somebody else, but it's nice to know that you have value to the Bay Area, so thank you.
The local, yeah.
Yeah.
And Mayor, just so you know, Mr. Erskine provided me with 3 references for projects similar in size and location in this area. And I called them and contacted them all 3, and they're all very good, positive references that provided for Amoroso, so very well done there. So.
Anything, Rick? Any different?
No, I'm also very excited that SJ Amoroso, a local firm, long-standing, great reputation in the area. My husband and I have known and worked, full disclosure, with Amoroso in his apartment projects in the past, but not since, gosh, I don't know, 2006, I think, was when that ended. But I'm just thrilled, and I think that with the bids that have come in below our estimators, our engineer's estimation, and I know that we were trying to be very conservative and very realistic. I think that personally, there's room to add the council chambers to the mix at this point and still stay under our estimator's costs.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to add that the fact that 3 of the 4 bids came in so close shows that is the market. And I thought you guys were very smart the way you did your bid. And you won the project, so you obviously were smart. But you weren't, your pencil wasn't too sharp. You really were very smart about it. I respect that.
So let me just add, through the mayor,
Yeah.
so theirs was the lowest base bid, but their bid alternate also was the lowest of the 3 44 million bids. The only other one was this also at 2.9. They also bid at 2.9 for the council chambers. So, but they also bid 55 million. So, I think that's of the other 44 million base bidders, they were the lowest for that. So I think that shows some economy of scale about adding it.
I also think it really has the potential to be a statement project. It's very well designed. This is not an easy community, but it's extremely well designed, and I think that you'll be able to benefit from that. And I think that's great. It was very smart. I really respect it.
So we just want to make sure that you guys understand that you're not allowed to make any noise.
No dust,
No dust.
Rubber hammers.
Exactly.
Rubber hammers that.
So Marty, how do you want to proceed on this? Because actually there's a couple decisions we have to make.
Yeah, there's 6 decisions, Mayor, and I'd like to maybe go one by one, starting with the first one.
Well, there's actually two in that first one.
Well, there's an option there, right? Option 1A and 1B, I guess.
Right.
And so the first one is to award a construction contract to S.J. Momoroso Construction Company for the construction of the Civic Center project, number 54015, being the lowest responsive bidder, Redwood Shores, for a fee of $44,177,000. And if selected, award the ad alternate for the project for a fee of $2,900,000. That's the decision for council.
So you want us to do the one and then add on second?
You have option 1 and option 2 in your staff report pretty much, so you can go either way.
Okay. Do you have any comment?
We can call for a motion?
I was actually gonna make a motion on both items,
Oh,
1
I'd
and
like
2.
Elizabeth to do the motion.
Okay, go ahead.
You're gonna make an,
Well, I think 1 and 2 are really connected, right? One is award the contract and the other is authorize the city attorney to prepare that contract and the city manager to sign it. So they seem like pretty much the same thing to me.
Right, well, so I'd love to make the motion to award the contract to S.J. Momoroso Construction Company for the construction of the Civic Center project, for the $44,177,000 plus the ad alternate for the project of $2.9 million, and also authorize the city attorney to prepare the city manager and execute a construction contract to construct the Civic Center project. Did I mess it up?
No, that was good. That's good. Would you like the second?
Sure.
Say it.
Unless you want to.
No, you two guys were on the committee. I think it's more appropriate that you.
Okay, no, I'm happy to.
So just because the city clerk didn't, Rick, did you second that motion?
I just did.
She didn't hear it, that's fine.
Okay, so, can we call for, a vote then? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, one abstain. Okay, so congratulations.
We have to cheer.
And congratulations to Marty as well.
Marty, thank you for bringing us across the goal line.
Team effort.
Really, and thank the city manager for his tenacity, and city attorney, and Robert for making the numbers work. He has magic numbers, and all of the CCAC members and that work tirelessly, and the value engineering, and Mr. DeGolia, Councilmember DeGolia, to be so astute in all of the negotiations going forward. Thank you.
Okay. Why don't we move on?
Yeah, let's move on to number 3, Mayor, and that is to approve a task order with Interwest Consulting Group to provide pre-construction move services for a not-to-exceed fee of $66,800. And now that you approve the contract and the bid alternate, things have to move very, very quickly to get people in temporary mobile modular units, as you approved last month already. So there's a lot of work to do, so we have to start like now on that stuff. So that's what this task order is for.
Any questions on number 3?
Can I make a comment? Just, are we skipping over number 2? Not,
Yeah, we did.
We already voted.
first voted.
Yeah, they included
I was paying attention.
For Councilmember DeGolia's efficiencies.
I voted for it, that's right.
Okay. All right, so
So I have a question on 3.
number 3, okay, go ahead.
And the dollar amount, can you explain
Mhm.
exactly where that comes from?
Item number 3, you actually approved that once in the past. When we had Rick Smelzer on board, who was doing the tagging and the auction and all that sort of stuff. So we didn't expend all of those funds, and we're just redoing it again. And this is half of the cost, because he's gotta help us get over into these new buildings, and then when it's all done, we're all gonna come back. So the cost model manager anticipates about 128 or so
Right.
thousand in total for this line item, so this is half of that line item.
And have we already spent the other half?
No,
We'll
that's
see
in
the
the
other
future
half.
when we bring it back.
Yeah,
A little less than half.
we'll see the other,
Back in.
we'll see the other half in the move. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Any public comments on this? Okay, no public comments, last comments by the council. All right, can we have a motion on number 3?
Oh, I can do that, I just didn't,
No,
we're leaning to the right today. I have a motion to approve item number 3 as written in the staff report, $66,800.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Sorry, they're still almost.
We're almost there. Seconds away.
Okay,
Less than
I
48
texted him
seconds.
earlier.
number 4.
Number 4, Mayor, is to approve a task order amendment number 3 with Interwest for continued Civic Center project management services through the construction phase of the Civic Center project for not to exceed fee of $416,300. And this is starting pretty much March 1st to June of 2021 throughout the duration of the construction project.
Any questions for Marty on number 4? I have one. Is that your salary? $416,000?
No.
You know, you're approving that.
All right, any
Well,
public comment?
actually, I have a question that's quite similar. This is for your services?
Correct.
And is that full-time services? How many?
No.
So what,
This is based on 100 hours a month at 26 a month at $160 an hour.
Does it include the IT
No,
support? And
no,
it's just for you?
just for me.
So it is your salary?
Yeah.
Well, right, but it's not full-time, so
Okay.
it's 100 hours is what this number is. And as you can see with WRNS, the next one, theirs is a little bit higher, right? And then the MAC 5 is actually even higher than that, so.
Okay.
and this is all included in our
Cost model management.
estimate?
Okay, any comments on this from the public? Okay, seeing no comments, then we'll close public comments. Last comments by the council.
I personally think it's a bargain, because I think we're gonna get more than, the hours that are contracted for out of Marty. Because I think he lives and sleeps this, and this is a really big job.
I'm 24/7
Yeah,
as you.
he's not, he doesn't turn this off when he goes home, he's thinking about solutions. And so I'd like to make a motion to authorize the Interest, contract for $416,300 and authorize city manager to execute the task, order amendment.
I will second.
Okay, I also think that Marty's a bargain.
She's smart.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, number 4.
Raise your prices.
5.
Number 5, Mayor, is to authorize staff to begin the construction phase of the Civic Center project. Which is exciting.
What does that mean?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll make the motion that we authorize staff to begin the construction phase of the Atherton Civic Center project.
Sufficient.
All right, I'll second that one.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
And number 6?
Number 6, Mayor, is to authorize staff to have WRNS Studio to begin construction administration support services phase 7 of the original agreement of April 2015 for not to exceed fee of $519,960.
Any questions on that one?
Is this to completion now?
Mhm.
Is
There's
this,
a closeout amount.
is phase 7 the last phase?
No, there's a-
Assuming there's not a change order.
There's a phase 8 closeout, which is 5 digits.
I don't have a phase 8,
So is it expected this will be through June 21?
Marty, you don't have a phase 8?
pardon?
You don't have a phase 8?
No.
I guess they'll come back with a amended request if it goes.
The as-built are in phase 7,
Oh, yeah, no, you're right, there's
Yeah.
only 7 phases.
so
So this is
That's it.
Looking at the original
there
contract.
should be nothing more
Thank
after that.
God.
I think they've spent a heck of a lot and an excessive amount with WRMS. They have their hand out every time we've said anything. And while I like the design and they've been here, they're an expensive group that it doesn't miss a change order.
Well, through the mayor. if I
Yes,
may
go
have a
ahead,
comment.
yeah, go ahead.
Hopefully, our construction team, when change orders are suggested by the architect, will scrutinize it and question the reasons and why and wherefore, and if it's significant, bring it back to our P&C group and staff, so that we have an opportunity to look at that also. I just change orders could kill us, so we don't want that to happen. And if that's one of your concerns about the architect initiating those, then
Yeah.
we need to be diligent and observant. So I think our back's against the wall.
Well, my goal is to use them as little as possible, Councilmember, so,
And that's a not to exceed number.
right.
But get every dime out of that five.
Part, yeah.
Yeah, on a billable basis. Well, it's not a guaranteed amount, it's a not to exceed amount.
Right,
Yeah.
that's true.
Okay. So,
Okay.
Any public comment?
Any other final comments? No. Any comments from the public? Okay, bring it back, council.
Motion approved, item number 6, as noted in the staff report, 519,960.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay.
Let's bring back.
All right, bring
Thank you,
back.
Mayor, thank you, Council.
Thank you, thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you,
nice.
guys.
Very
Good job.
nice.
Thank you.
Very nice job. And, we've been waiting to hand these out.
Here we are.
Yeah, he did, and look at this, he put his shirt on my purse.
There you go.
You'll be around.
He tried to trip over.
It ended up over.
So he did it.
All right. Have we said that they can park in your driveway?
Whether you say it or not,
The budget. Okay. Let's move on to item number 2, which is the 2019-2020 budget kickoff and overview. And we have an excellent presentation I hear from our finance director, Robert.
Thank you, Mayor. Council.
Sometimes we go a little long.
Yeah, this is, I'm gonna go very quick through this. Again, this is the budget kickoff and overview for the 19-20 fiscal year. We just had our mid-year budget last month, 18-19. Let's go over quickly the year-end projection, fiscal position, major revenue sources and 5-year forecast, expenditure categories, 5-year forecast, part of the budget process and discussion, and in our calendar. So kind of to quickly review, at mid-year we projected 8.1 million in revenue. That includes ERAF of 1.69 million. We had budgeted 1,025,000, so that came in 666,000 higher. To expenditures of 14 million. So net positive fund balance of 3.8 million is projected for fiscal year 18-19.
Robert, ERAP was higher this year
Because there was there's some changes coming into this year. So starting in this fiscal year, and this calendar year in August, we'll start receiving ERAP twice a year. Usually we receive it in January, so we'll receive ERAP in August of 19, and then again in January. The reason for this, there was an additional 28 million excess in the county, and so that excess is a one-time excess this year, so it equated to about 400,000 for us in ERAF. So we received 1.6 million. Without that excess, we'd be about 1.3 million. So still a couple $100,000 over in our budget. So We'll continue to budget the ERAF conservatively. In our forecast, it's about a little bit over $1 million. I think just the way the excess ERAF, it keeps increasing, and I kind of have a feeling that we'll continue to have some windfall in there, but just having caution to wind, budgeting at $1 million is a prudent thing for us to do right now.
Good question too. I'm just looking at the expenditures, I know the council just took a vote. How will that, are you gonna discuss that later, or how will it change the expenditures line?
Well, the expenditure line right now, that 14 million, we increased it only 9,000 at mid-year. So it was 14,088,000. This is just a forecast, again, just to kind of get us an understanding, just for assumptions to see how things lay out for the next 5 years. But in next month, April 3rd, we'll have our general fund budget discussion for the 1920 fiscal year, and that'll have more budget and forecasting for just the one fiscal year, the 1920.
So the 18-19 will not be affected by the Civic Center approval, or?
No, well, the 18-19 is just the flow through. We projected that with the flow through of 18-19, we're gonna have an addition of about 3.8 million. Budget time, it was we were expecting 1.4 million flow through.
Well, Robert, I think this is only the general fund.
Right.
And the Civic Center project is in the capital improvement fund. So it will not affect general fund at all. It shouldn't. Okay. That's the answer.
So, wait, before you leave, let me just ask a question. So, you've got 3 bar representations here. The one on the left is the budget. The one in the center is your mid-year estimate for the full year. And then what does 18-19 ERAF mean?
So that last column, the third column, it rolls up the ERAF in there.
So there's no ERAF included in the budget? Or in the mid-year estimate?
In the mid-year estimate, it was included, but it's below the line. So that 16.4 million is just the revenues prior to ERAF. And that 14.09 million is the 9 million increase at estimate for mid-year.
Right.
So that the third to the right, the 18.1
just shows the
million
impact of the
that
addition of
1.6.
ERAF.
Exactly.
ERAF is technically property taxes to us.
Right.
And a number of years ago, we took it out
We
of.
decided to make it a one-time deal.
Yes.
I understand, but it flows into the general fund, which is why you're showing it this way.
Correct.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm looking at your numbers, and of course, all this stuff is 18-19. When I looked at your spreadsheet, and we're looking at the expenditures. So, you know, 14-15, 11-6, and then went down, 15-16, 16-17, 11-4, then 17-18, 17-18, 12, and then there's a $2 million jump to this number here, the 14 million. I realize we're going to go over the expenditures in the next session, okay? But could you just give us kind of a rough order of magnitude of where that 2 million is going? I realize that the pension expenses are going up a little bit, but with the adjustments that we've made, it's not that much from the numbers that you had in here in detail. But it's a $2 million jump in expenditures, and I just didn't see it in your write-up in the staff report as to where that was coming from. And so I don't want to get into it too much, but I'd like to have rough order magnitude numbers, okay? And I think it's actually in your next to last chart, okay?
So you're regarding the fiscal year 18-19 revised budget?
Yeah.
14 million?
Yeah, and that's the number that you have here, but I compared it to 17-18.
Right. Well, I think the important thing to understand is and what we've done in the previous years, it's we have a budget, and we try to, that's what we set for operations. But we've been successful in the past couple of years that we've saved at least $1 million below budget in expenditures. So it's just, we run an operation as lean as possible. A lot of our most important operations is a lot of contract based. our biggest expenditure is police department and public works. So the thing is we have a budget, but we stay below.
So the numbers you're actually looking at in the table, the 17-18, those are actual.
Yeah, I know that's actually.
Yeah.
The budget for that year was closer to 14
million,
something.
right.
And so the 17-8 of the 18-19 column is our budget number. The actual numbers at year end
Right, they'll come
will
in.
likely be less.
So wait, so let me understand, so it is possibly your answer to Bill's comment that the difference between the 12 million that he's looking at and the 14 million that we're looking at on the chart is actually the difference between a budget and an actual? That,
It's an actual from the prior year.
yeah, well, I understand that.
Well, I would think that if, you know, as you do your budgeting, I realize we have, you know, cost of living and maybe expanding an operation here or there, but you know, when we're making a budget, we should be taking into account and the learning that we had from the previous year. So if every year we're underrunning our budget by $1 million or $2 million, then we should not be over budgeting.
No, I agree, and I don't.
Well, that's not actually what's occurring, right? What's actually happening is we may have a staff member who resigns or leaves, and we have vacancies in the PD.
Right.
Or we have projects that we schedule to do that we don't do within the park or elsewhere. And at mid-year, we still anticipate doing those things, or we still anticipate having those staff members on board, but we have salary savings or project savings
But
that occur at year end.
a park project wouldn't be reflected in the
Operations in the park, yes.
operations.
That are
So-
part of the public works
All right,
budget.
well, we're gonna go over that, I guess, in the next meeting,
Yeah.
so that's fine,
Yeah.
that's, I just wanted rough order magnitude, you kinda gave me something to look at when it comes back out, thank you. Do you wanna say anything?
Well, I just wanted to comment that I think that, Robert, we've always been very conservative with the revenue projections, and the budgeted numbers for revenue are always lower, as he said, with ERAF. I mean, we kind of just plug out $1 million, and this year we got another 600. I mean, so that makes a big difference. And then the costs, on the cost side, we don't want to run up to the wall and not have money to pay for those budgeted cost numbers. So there's the difference, and I don't think that we can hit it on the nail.
And there's a couple line items specifically. If you look at the building department, for example, that line item in 17-18 is 1.275 million.
That's 200,000.
And but we budget based on what we project building permits to be for the year. And if those numbers of building permits don't actually hit, your number in the anticipated for the budget at actual is gonna be less, because the expenditure on the contract's less. So we don't wanna budget under and then we can't pay the contract for building services.
No, I agree, it's just, you know, the police is going up by $1 million, we're gonna go over this, if the police is gonna go up by $1 million, $700,000 in Robert's organization, not I don't mean to.
Mr. O'Bonnell.
Don't mean to point. But anyway, I'll look forward to seeing the expenditure forecast as we get to the next meeting, thank you.
So this is just a snapshot of where we're at in 18-19.
But I guess I wanna make one more comment before we go, because on the budget, which is really what this meeting is about, and I talked to the city manager about this earlier, I know we're conservative on ERAF, and this year's an exception, because we got this bump because of this extra money. But when you look back, there was one year that we over budgeted on ERAF, right, like 4 years ago, I think.
I think it was about 100,000. We had over budgeted and what actually came in.
I think we budgeted 1.2 and it
Came in at
quite hit it.
166,
Yeah,
1,066,000.
it didn't quite hit it, and since then, we've under budgeted.
Right, and then it's
quite
been-
intentionally.
Mhm.
And, you know, I guess as long as we know we're under budgeting, it doesn't really matter, we're treating it as a one-time, not part of the general fund operating expense or revenue.
Mhm.
But where it is going to have an impact is when we look at the funds that we have on the cash flow for the Civic Center project and what we need to borrow, because we all wanna minimize how much we need to borrow, and I don't wanna be under budgeting. I mean, I don't mind under budgeting a little bit, but I don't wanna be overly under budgeting and in response to that under budgeting, go out and over borrow.
Right.
Yeah,
That would be a
exactly.
mistake.
That's exactly.
Or the flip, conservatively estimating our expenditures and then
Right.
overrunning every year.
Yeah.
Because if there's a support on the
So,
other
so
side.
in general, it doesn't really matter, because in the last few years, we've had the blessing of having a surplus. But where we're coming up with the need to possibly borrow to address this timing gap, it has an impact. So that's where I feel quite concerned about.
I agree, we need to be more conservative in our,
No, and we are, and
Isn't the issue, you actually, I totally agree with what you just said, but isn't the issue that we don't have control over it, it's a discretionary thing that
Right.
somebody else is making a decision on.
Right.
That's
So
why we've been conservative.
Yeah, that's why we've been conservative,
I have a
yeah.
question. How much lead time will we have if the state decides to stop giving it to us? You know, how will we know when that day comes, and will we have enough notice?
That's why we've taken it out of our reliance.
That's why it's,
Yeah.
below
Yeah.
below the line.
And I think we have at least a year, so ERAF is just like property taxes, there's a lag, right? So we receive half, the way it works is, so for 18-19 fiscal year, we receive half of the remaining of 17-18 fiscal year. So, and then there's always a true up, right? So, I could conservatively say at least a year and a half, we'll have, understanding, if that ever goes away. So, just to give some history on it, there's only 3 counties in the whole state of California that have SSERAF. That's Marin County, Napa, and San Mateo County. So, because this is a state-driven, property tax it's used to fund schools, for ERAF to go away, for it to go up, that means the state would have to increase that funding formula for schools. If they increase that funding formula, or what will happen is then the state will have to backfill and put more property taxes into the schools.
Yeah.
So that's why it's compressing to the point where you only have 3 counties in the entire state that are having this excess ERAF. So could the state continue to manipulate that formula? Yes, but at the expense of the state having to pay more money out of their own.
But there's other ways for them to do it. They can manipulate the definition of what that excess ERAF can be used for, who it can be allocated to,
It has to be
Yeah.
plowed back into
put it on hold,
education or something.
all kinds of things.
does it have to be a legislative change, or can it, because the governor has talked about increasing spending, for the schools, as well as increasing spending to pay down not only teachers, but other pension things.
It'd be a legislative, and I mean, we get 1.6 million, so, you know, the county level, theirs is in the 20s of millions in ERAF. You know, fire district is in
Huge.
the double digits, in the millions that we are. Just in relation, I'm just saying, I mean, I'm sorry to bring that up, but, just in relation, I mean, we're 1.6 million of hundreds of millions of excess ERAF.
But going to Rick's point, the question really is, can we count on this? Can we, you know, as we project forward, how much of this can we count on? And I guess that's another topic for another day, but it's an important one to get right.
So we've been wrestling with it
And
since time immemorial.
Right, and I think we've taken important steps for it in discussions with other agencies, is they've been using the excess ERAF for what we've done, one-time expenditures for capital funding, for liabilities and stuff. So for anticipation that maybe one day, if that does go away, we've used those funds for that reason.
Right, and not in operations, not just for salaries and operations.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm ready to move on.
Alrighty, so then, just basically fund balance reserves, you know, we're at 21 million, we're projecting at the end of 18-19. Our total reserve requirement is 5.4 million, so that leaves us a general fund unallocated reserve balance of 15.5 million. Again, this is just a discussion of forecasting revenues. This does not represent actual budget expectations year over year. This is just to give us something to evaluate based on, we make budget adjustments.
So just before we leave the reserve, so included in the reserves is the 505 million facilities replacement.
500,000.
500,000, that's what I meant. Is that going to be used right away? I mean, when are we using that in this project?
When needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's dedicated, the council's already authorized it for the Civic Center project.
And then we'll have a conversation on the 20%
But,
contingent price
but
as
it's
well.
still shown as a reserve in the 18-19 budget, which is gonna be the budget that begins coming July 1st.
No, it's 19.
Oh, no, that's the current budget, okay. So maybe the next budget will be gone.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can,
Okay, great.
and we can
Great,
remove
great,
that,
great.
and it'll just be a flow through, it'll just go to the unallocated component.
And as the mayor was saying, we are gonna talk about the 20% contingency.
Right, right.
So this is our reserve requirement right now, projecting out till 18-19 ending. Again, this is just the forecast, 5-year forecast. Property taxes are 70% of our general fund revenue. Building fees are about 12%. And then ERAF, again, is below the line and represents 6% of our general fund revenue. It's just quickly, this is our major revenue sources, 5-year forecast. Property taxes projected at between 3.5 to 4.5 million. 4.5%, sorry. 4.5% is a projection right now for 1920. In the next 2 fiscal years within the forecast, it's at 4%. And in the last 2 years, we have it forecasted at 3.5%. Building fees in our forecast are projected at 2%. And again, just going back to the ERAF, we're estimating 1 million below the line as revenue. So-
Robert, those projections in the out years are what's been suggested by HDL.
Right,
That's what I was
correct.
gonna ask. That's what I was thinking.
Mhm.
And that's around the 3.5 to 4.5% increase?
4.5, and like I said, in the first fiscal year out,
Hands out.
and then it
Mhm.
kind of
Good, okay.
gradually goes down. But that could change as well.
And the actuals that we've been receiving is more like 7?
It's been more like
Nine.
6 to 7.
Yeah, 6 to 7.
Mhm.
But HDL does not anticipate that continuing. All the Prop 8 catch-ups have pretty much been done, and now we're just back to the 2% plus.
Well, they didn't anticipate it last year either.
They didn't. I mean, every time you're right.
Well, it just brings good news once we get the report.
Can I, this starts with 1920. Is there any chance that we'll have higher than expected in 1819, current year?
Property taxes,
Mhm.
we already know those.
We adjusted it, we said property tax would be about 2.3%. So it wasn't higher as in previous years, like last year. So it equated to almost like 230,000 increase over property taxes. That's where we're kind of just, the way our budget and our actuals been the previous years, we're kind of almost catching up to the actuals as it's happening. But this year, last year, I think the increase was almost 500,000 at mid-year budget. This year is about 225,000. But there could be, I mean, as we start to, we'll get more revenue in April, and we can kind of see that, and hopefully catch up from the 18-19, or the calendar 2018 property tax roll. That's where the true up starts to come in April and May. So then, again, this one is just our other revenue sources, sales tax, franchise fees, business license, planning fees, the public works part. So these revenues are between 1.5 and 2%. Majority of them are at 1.5% in projections going out in this forecast.
So Robert, I brought this up to George. I thought that you've got growth in the park revenue, and if we're going to be putting operations in the park, that may impact some of the larger gatherings that may be there. People may decide that they're gonna go elsewhere. I just suggest that maybe
Right. Well,
as we move forward, you maybe look at that or whatever.
Correct, and again, this is just to help us, just with us, to see if our assumptions are okay looking out for 5 years. To see if for some reason there's such a an inverse in whether revenue or expenditures. This is just to help us for planning and assumptions, but correct. With the park revenue, as we get to the 19-20 budget, so we look into that forecasting, and yes, there could probably be a reduction in that revenue component just on the reasons for some of the services, the park being used at a more administrative.
I wouldn't anticipate that there'd be a huge reduction in weddings
Right.
and such, because those are on the opposite side of the park. And since we're not gonna be in the main building, we're not gonna be in that area, we're focused in the parking lot, the only impact to those types of events would be parking related.
Whoa. The North Meadow
Meadow.
use.
But the North Meadow use is different.
Yeah.
And those are the folks that might rent the carriage house, they get the Meadow as well.
Yeah.
And then the big events like Facebook and Google and others that come,
Right.
they're gonna be parking impacted.
Yeah, there's that auction that comes every year, they take it over for 4 days.
Yeah, more of the social fees, I think, we'll look at and stuff on those that use that North Meadow. Just real quick, general fund major expenditures, forecast, this is the percentage of departments to the budget, so, you can just see the biggest one right there is police department's 54.8% of our expenditure budget, followed by, works at 14.8%.
Is that concentration of police going up over time? If we roll back a few years, would it be that same or would it be?
It's actually, it's hovering around the same. I think the year before was about 53%, 53.4%. I think, in relation to when our expenditures, whether they increase by 2%, 3%, the actual portion to each department is pretty much stable, static.
Except for finance keeps going up.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there.
It's that all those staff.
Yeah, right, no.
Parties, Girl Scout cookies.
Right.
Auditors.
Auditors, right, exactly, auditors and staffing, you know, I mean, it's, I think, yeah, every department, I think we've been relatively stable, static as a percentage to overall expenditures.
In fiscal year 14-15, the PD was about 48%. And then in 17-18, they're up to the 58%. But in the intervening years, the council has added positions to the police department, the SRO, and.
We added two positions.
Two positions, so that is an increase in the budget just as a result of that.
And that's where we had that 372 of the parcel tax that was
Right.
allocated, at that time. So, major components of operational expenditures, again, labor costs just forecasted at 4% within the forecast, doesn't mean that it's actual, but it's just what we're using as an assumption tool. Pension costs in 1920, this is the relation of the normal cost that the town pays, based on payroll. It's anticipated to be 10.3% for local miscellaneous, and local safety is at 23.6%. But as your council's aware, we've done some amendments to the contract where the allowable max pickup of pension costs of 1% to miscellaneous and 3% to public safety has taken place. So in this next fiscal year, instead of 10.3 for local miscellaneous, it'll be 9.3%. And instead of 23.6%, our portion would be 20.6%. And then another thing, OPEB ARC, that's something that we continue to look at. This year was $198,000 that we're at, in our budget for pre-funding. Our pay-as-you-go is about $498,000, so you're looking at about $668,000, and that's just the OPEB and pay-as-you-go component. So again, there are unknown additional contributions just based off of the healthcare costs.
The mayor and I were chatting the other day about when the council contributed a large part of our excess ERAF to OPEB, we set it at about 80–90% of active or retiree amounts based on evaluation. And that is now a closed system, so there's no more long-term pension or long-term health for retirees, just the existing staff, and then the requirement on the CalPERS is just a bare minimum of 3 feet. So there's no more additions to that pool. So as those employees retire or leave to go to other agencies or pass away at some point, our debt on that goes down. So it won't get more than that, it'll just get less.
Yeah. And at the fiscal year, we had, in the trust, we have about 6.4 million in it, and we've contributed 5 million to the trust. So right now, based on the actuarial for that, it's a little bit about 12 million, so we're almost, actually, it's about 4 million is the, based on the financial, is our unfunded liability component right now. So.
When we did the audit, our total unfunded liability is 16.
Well, that's
something.
everything.
Yeah,
That's
right, that's
pension, everything. But
exactly right.
Specifically for OPEB though,
Yeah.
we have about 6.4 million in there. So the unfunded component right now, on that is 4 million.
Yeah.
So, I think we, in 2012-13 when we began, contributing to that to now, we've made some considerable headway on that OPEB component. So, kudos to the council in getting that done. Operational expenditures, we forecasted between 3 to 4%, just for, again, just operational needs and budgets. It doesn't mean that it's actual expenditures.
When you say you're forecasting to 3 to 4%, just as you said with labor costs, does that mean you're forecasting an increase?
Just on the operational component, correct. Like, if whether it's
in the 5-year
maintenance.
forecast.
Right.
That's the numbers.
But each year you're
It's
forecasting an increase of
Yes.
3 to 4%. And on labor costs, you forecasted an increase of 4% a year.
Right. Again, this is just to see if our assumptions in looking out in out years, if there's anything that can kind of show us an underlie of where we're at, and we can understand where we'll be operationally. Again, the UAL, it's 200 for 1920. The UAL component is 298,000, and public safety 777,000. This year we had paid 838,000 in the 18-19 fiscal year. So this 1920 is about 1,076,000. So the increase is about 238,000 in the UAL.
Discount rate.
Mhm.
So Robert, directionally, assuming the economy doesn't continue to boom the way it is and if the market slows down, things like that, what would the impact be on some of these numbers?
I think, well, on the impact, I think a lot of it would just, one could be on the pension side. It depends on how that happens with the interest rate and how the pensions do. On the, we can understand on the expenditure side, other costs, maybe maintenance costs, those could go up. But more importantly, I think on the revenue side is where we want to focus on to make sure, property tax wise. I mean, if the economy tanked when it happened a couple of years ago, in 11-12, the town started seeing increases in property taxes. I think while everybody else was having a hard time in the property taxes. For us, I think we probably won't see the magnitude of increases like we have in the past.
I'm more focused on the pensions. We run the risk that the states would come back to us and say, hey, we had assumed whatever their assumption is now 6%, and we're actually getting 2%, and therefore you've got to pony up some more money.
Right, and we'll be able to see that because in our actuarial evaluations, when they come out, they kind of show us, they give us an estimate. If the interest rate was at 7.25%, let's say it came in at 6%, 5%, it kind of gives us what a change in our unfunded liability will be, and also an estimate of what our UAL payment will be going forward. So it's gone up between 125,000 to 225,000 relative in fiscal years as far as UAL expense.
Yeah.
So, but I understand what you're saying, but that's something that we will be able to manipulate as far as look at data, look at cost models that we have, and kind of weather that storm. Just some major components of operational costs, that we have. Again, we have some professional service contracts out there, building contract that George alluded to earlier. That's in relation to building permits, and in the budget's about $1 million. We have IT services, we have the MCE contract, we have contract custodial services, park event services, planning and legal services. Those are just a few of some major component of operational expenditures. So going back here, this is
Wait,
just,
I'm just looking, so the police are 54% and DBW is 14%. What am I missing?
You're on,
He-
you're
you're
on the
on
next
page.
slide.
Oh,
Next
oh.
slide.
Yeah, he's
You're at
just
one,
now.
I'm on that page.
No, he just flipped
He just
it.
flipped it.
Yeah.
He was
Look
on
at that,
this
we're
one.
getting a raise.
So again, just
Okay.
this header right here, this is just operational costs. This does not include salaries and benefits. So this is just operations, maintenance, services, technical services.
Contracts, this
Right.
is shovels, this is
Yeah, utilities,
barricades, utilities.
yeah, maintenance, repair, phones, technology, computer,
Wait a minute.
equipment.
Costs $82,000 for the council? What
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
operation?
Oh, you're no salaries.
Right.
So that's all.
Oh, that is the council
Oh, it's
budget.
the
But
lights,
you have
the
memberships,
energy.
some of the memberships that the town does, I think are incorporated into the council budget.
Mhm.
It's the water, it's the water that we have.
These things are expensive.
We
Yeah.
should have no plastic.
Okay, well, sometimes we get cookies, not now.
Right.
It's
Come
because
on.
you're gonna have dinner soon.
That's
Well, that's what it is.
Community activities, I think is one of the larger
Right.
line items.
Community activities,
Community activities, one of the larger items in the council budget, that's, park events, movies.
council.
well, some of that's an admin, but
Oh,
a lot of it too is, I mean, you know, training, workshops,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
you know,
That's what you guys all do.
Oh, we
too.
could skip the training.
you know, all the
Anything
conferences,
at a conference,
good stuff like that. And I believe there's some HSR
Yeah.
expenditures in there budgeted.
What's in the building? Like 1.2 basically.
Majority of that is the building, the contract with Interwest.
That's what we forecast, the revenue split
Right.
that they're gonna
Right.
get.
There's some operations in there as far as, there's some salary in there with some staff, but a majority of that, about 900,000, close to 900,000 is just the building component for the Interwest contract. And again, that's driven by, the building permits that are done throughout in that department.
I think this is a new slide. I don't think we've had this slide.
This one?
In the past. You're breaking it down. You're breaking it down.
I'm just making next month's
A little easier.
study session a little easier, yeah.
A little shorter, yeah. There you go.
Trying.
I thought this was a big overview. We're into
I
the
love it.
weeds.
Right,
We need-
so this is just a snapshot, this was in your staff report, just to show you the unfunded accrued liability, where we're at. So, we're at 1 million projected in 1920, in 23-24, it'd be at 1.6 million. And again, these are assumptions that we have, that we received through the CalPERS, actuarial.
$100,000.
Then again, reserve fund balances, we've seen that, we have a 15% emergency, a 20% set aside based on operations. We have that 505,000 facility component, and then the remaining is the unallocated reserve fund balance. And this is anything that is not earmarked or reserved or committed. Previous year allocations we've done is to workers' comp. We've added, we've made allocations to the CIP in previous years. So again, anything that this is that, going forward, we're anticipating that the unallocated fund balance will be used towards the civic center. And then again, this is just a high-level snapshot, summary and forecast where we're at. 2.9 million net fund balance. It's and then going forward, you can see that it's that 2.3 million in 23-24 when we use all those budget assumptions. Again, ERAF is included as major revenue up here. It's at about 1 million estimate. And again, these do not represent actual expenditures, budgets, this is just a forecasting tool for us.
And so as a forecasting tool, you remember that spreadsheet we did when we were talking about the Civic Center project and what we anticipated as revenue in those out years to be allocated back to the project. And we said about 2.2 million excess surplus as well as ERAP. So we're hitting those marks projected in the out years.
Yeah.
Just say, so I asked the question, with that, spreadsheet, that was not taking any of the, 20%, operational reserve.
That is correct.
And that's an unrestricted operation. The 15% is a restricted reserve.
That is correct.
And so, that's something that may come back to council at some point
Yep.
for discussion.
When we get into the weeds of the cash flow analysis, once the contractor puts that together and Robert's able to put together a detailed spreadsheet, that's when you'll have that conversation.
I think that we should pay upon delivery.
Hopefully not all up front, I don't know. I'm hoping otherwise, it's spread out throughout the project. Again, so again, here's the calendar. Operations budget for general fund is April 3rd. Our CIP capital improvement budget will be May 1st, council study session. We'll bring everything back on June 5th on budget study session, based off of our discussions from the previous study sessions. And then, with a very rapid budget adoption on June 19th.
So,
Optimistic.
Yeah.
the operations budget, April 3rd, that, is there a possibility, I mean, that could be a very long meeting. I don't know, in discussing. I would hope that we don't add lots and lots of other agenda items to that, because there is that other meeting that both, Councilmember DeGoya and I, well, separate meetings, have to go to after that.
Actually, I think things are now May 1st.
Oh, so mine is
Yeah.
at 7:00 in Millbrae, and so either we could move the meeting up so that we have more time for it, or just devote 2 hours to that.
Did people respond to your 3:30 or 3 o'clock?
I heard from Vice Mayor DeGolia that his meeting was moved to May 1st.
So no one else wrote back?
No, then Councilmember
We're still
Rose was
looking
just
at,
speaking.
some of
about
us
that.
are still looking at our schedules.
Well, why don't we get back with George and see if we can move the meeting up a little bit to make sure that Robert has enough time and Elizabeth has enough time to participate in the home.
As a general rule, the stuff that happens during the day complicates my life. Let's put it that way. I view myself as having a job, and this is being so when stuff happens during like 4 o'clock, and then I mean I can probably periodically make it 3:30 or something, but a regular like 3 o'clock, it gets to be in the middle
No,
of the
no,
work.
I wasn't moving it permanently, just
Okay.
this one time.
Yeah, for me, the request is twice a year because that's when Park and Rec meets at 5:30.
Yeah.
So to
That they change.
have this one at 4, and that one at 5:30,
But
means I have to miss a meeting.
The capital improvement budget review should be awful short.
And that's
Yeah,
when,
and I think,
True.
and to maybe, I hope.
and there, I have no meeting at,
Right.
it's every other,
Okay.
it's like, April and then June.
And maybe to help ease, that April 3rd study session, I think the allotted time, we should be okay with if there's additional discussions, we can bring it back on May 1st with the CIP budget. We have another budget study session on June 5th. I think, without having the fear that we're gonna have long meetings, I think we have plenty of study sessions to
Well, maybe we
incorporate.
just don't add a lot of
I
other
agree.
agenda items to it, okay?
Okay. Rick had another question.
So I'm just looking at your summary and forecast slide, which was the one you had up before this. And I'm comparing it to the general fund revenue slide. Right, and the general fund's revenue slide for 18-19, you're now estimating 18.2 million essentially of revenue. right? And that our estimate for 1920, which is the year after, you're now estimating 18.2, is showing an estimate of 18.8.
Well, say, yeah, he says,
17.8, so you're showing, in fact, that the estimate that we're, you know, we're going down $400,000, which maybe is because of ERAF, but it also may be just because of very conservative budgeting.
well, yeah, you estimated at $1 million, and maybe that's a little low, but
Right.
always go look at that.
But you have to remember,
4%.
ERAF in this year was almost 700,000 increase, and, you know, there's that swing. We went from 700,000 in 18-19 to only budgeting $1 million going forward. So there's, when we do the revenues, we look at it and verify and try to kind of rehash, actuality with
Each
revenue.
percent of property taxes should be somewhere in the neighborhood of $110,000, right? Each percent increase, and we're envisioning a 4% increase in property tax, that should be about $450,000 delta right there year over year.
Yeah.
Which is not a wash with the 600, but
Right.
it's certainly.
Well, we just need to, yeah, we need to be, we need to take a hard look at all of your assumptions and the numbers and the ERAF and things like that as we're looking forward at your cash flow analysis for the Civic Center. Because as Rick pointed out, you know, we're gonna then go out and have to borrow money. And we don't want to under-borrow, but we don't want to significantly over-borrow as well.
No, and just looking through this, I mean, the net fund balance of, you know, projection, 2.9 million. In previous discussions when we've done the forecast model with the Civic Center, that included 1 million in excess ERAF and then the flow through of revenue over expenditures. So we estimated about 2 million, in previous discussions, so this is 2.9 million. Again, yeah, something we can look at and we'll continue to just review.
And it's largely those first 2 fiscal years there, that are the project years.
That's right, those are the ones.
Yep.
Any other questions for Robert?
Thank you, Robert.
Okay, item 3. Item 3 was added at my request, and the reason that we are gonna have the brief conversation, was that Elizabeth and I had been, invited to a session with David Hill, to specifically talk about CASA and the Senate Bill 50, and I did not want us to go to the meeting without hearing comments from the whole council, seeing as, you know, we're going with the fire district, you know, we've had discussions. Harry and I and George met, and he circulated what we thought were some ideas and got some input back, so. This is really for us to just have kind of an open-ended discussion, rather briefly, so that when either of us say something, it's not wildly different than what you thought. So, it's not a staff report. So why don't I know that several members of the council have had conversations with the author of Senate Bill 50, and all of us, I think, have spoken with Mark Berman at one time or another, and as well as spoken with the city manager. So maybe a good starting point would be those who have spoken with the author of the bill to kind of share their discussions.
That would not be me.
I know that.
Yeah, I couldn't say something.
Oh, sure.
So I did have an opportunity to talk to Senator Wiener, and I know that his bill, SB 50, is motivated by what he feels to be an extremely pressing need, and I think in California there is a pressing need for additional housing, in particular additional affordable housing. And he's trying to do anything that he can to encourage that housing to be built around transit centers, on the theory that if people live near a transit center, they're gonna drive less. And I think there's some validity to that, but it's his bill, as you probably know, says that if a developer desires to build a building within a half a mile of a train station, that there's no parking required to be provided with that building, which is obviously very contrary to almost all local building codes. And I just think it's absurd to think that somebody, let's just say that there was a 4-story apartment building that had 100 units in it, or I don't know what, it doesn't matter how big it is, but let's just say there's a multi-unit building with 100 units in it within a quarter mile of a train station. It doesn't mean people aren't gonna have cars. They're gonna have cars, and those cars are gonna end up on the street. So and I think the League of California Cities is gonna take that on. This bill is just a proposed bill. There's gonna be a number of amendments to it, and Wiener knows that. What I specifically asked him was what his attitude was about a train station that only had weekend service. And he said, well, absolutely, that wouldn't apply to my bill. Which, his goal is to get support for his bill. I do think that there's going to be pressure for any transit center, and this is consistent with prior Senate bills. There's been at least a 10-year period of trying to focus more development around transportation hubs, and that's not going to stop. That's only going to continue. What I tried to emphasize to him, and as a policy matter, a position that I think is very important, is that there's a lot of housing available that much of which, not all of which, but much of which could absolutely be included in affordable housing that exists as accessory buildings and as empty rooms. And in a community like Atherton, where it tends to be an older community, there's quite a large number of accessory buildings that are unused and empty rooms that are unused. And if people could be motivated to make those available to people that want them, it would help the housing issue. I don't think it solves a single family home need that young families have, but it would address some of that. And frankly, for me, I have felt this most critically in terms of how we as a society can support, in particular, our teachers and police to live locally. And we've had a number of discussions about this on the council, and our attorney has advised us that there's a perceived conflict of interest when somebody provides property to, for example, a police officer, but it could easily also be a teacher. And I think that's a real issue. And I've proposed that there be a bill, and I think this would be an appropriate thing to talk to Senator Hill about, which would identify the burden of proof for whether there is a conflict or not. I think that if someone is providing a room or an accessory building, particularly to police or teachers, that there should be an assumption that there's not a conflict, and that state law could establish that. And of course, if there's evidence of a conflict, that can always come forward and should come forward, and that would prevail. But I think there's a really big issue about housing that exists that's not being utilized.
Okay.
And I just think they've got smart people up there, and they need to really focus on that piece.
Good.
Okay, so I've had a couple of interactions with Senator Wiener. One was at the same housing forum event that Rick spoke of when he Actually, he left it. You must have warmed him up for me, because when I approached him at the end of the sessions of the forum, he was on his way out of the lobby, and introduced myself to him and Atherton, and explained our situation with our weekend only training. He says, well, of course, I just don't see where that would be impacted at all. And I said, well, we're considering adding weekday service once the electrification, because Caltrain has promised that. He said, well, how many, and I said, well, how many could we have? We had a little interchange about that. So he says, well, clearly I think Atherton would not qualify, and I said, so maybe your bill could be rewritten such that small cities or towns like ours with a population of under X population could be carved out, or we have more specific. He says, well, I'm really open to suggestions, send me some language, this and that. So fast forward a couple weeks ago at the CCAG meeting, we had invited him to the legislative committee meeting prior to the main CCAG meeting, and he came. He gave us 15 minutes of his time, because he's a very busy guy. He's popping in everywhere he can. But what the CCAG Ledge Committee had done was put together a presentation of all of the affordable housing starts that San Mateo County is doing to get ahead of this jobs, housing imbalance. I agree that he wants to have transit-oriented housing, and it's an easy target to say, if you're along a transit hub, you need to relax your zoning codes. If you read his bill a year ago, right, that went down in flames, and there was no height limit. I mean, it could have been, I don't know, you probably know better than I do, Lisa, but it was quite extensive. But this is still, for our town, not an acceptable formula for creating high density along our corridor right next to our train station. So I spoke in public comments because this issue was in the Ledge Committee, and he recognized me, he talked with me about it, and he says, really get together and send me, and he said this to all of the Ledge people, that send them language and they will work on it. He says the bill's not done. The bill's, but what we need to do is address the housing jobs imbalance. There's a critical need for more housing in California, and it seems like many of the cities across the state are not doing what they need to do to move the needle, okay? And so I think that with Senator Hill, we will be able to kind of lay this stuff out. He represents not just us, he represents San Mateo County. And so I think that we have an opportunity to lay it out. And then you had sent the information from the Southern California.
Right.
There are many more organized efforts to counteract this one-size-fits-all.
Right.
And we cannot allow that. Whether or not Atherton, and I get this all the time from CK, well, Atherton's not doing their share of adding any housing, any affordable housing, so you can't say, well, it's against our general plan, but we are doing things with our housing element. We have an approved housing element, and maybe Lisa can speak, if you'd let her, Mayor, to what we have been doing in adding the second dwelling units to comply. I mean, and then maybe we need to talk about, are there other areas, maybe not along the rail corridor, but maybe along, the El Camino, I don't know where, that might be suitable for a rezoning situation.
So-
Gary's looking at his eyes at me.
I just got a tinkle in my eye.
You did a twinkle?
Twinkle or tinkle?
Oh.
So
He's looking at Robert,
I've spoken, with Mark Berman, and George and I have had some conversations on this as well, so, something in affordable housing is going to happen sooner or later, whether it's this bill or not. And so, you know, we need to prepare. I agree with, the comments of both, the council members that, you know, the no parking, the rail situation that we have here doesn't necessarily put us in there. The fact that we're fully built out, you know, there could be some sort of issue there. And those things really have not been addressed. And when I spoke with Mark about the CASA initiative, you know, my comment to him was, just like with the housing element, you need to give us a goal, and we need and a timetable to meet the goal, and we'll find a way that meets the goal with regards to what our needs are. And it may be that we have to have a citizens group and talk about where we want to change in our general plan. We may have to go do that, and SB 50 kind of talked about that, you know, that you can have a 5-year period where you can have a citizens group and decide really what you want to do as a community. Now, we do have a number of affordable housing items here in town already, and I know that some of the, like the schools or the college or, you know, Menlo School used to have teacher housing there, and in some cases they have money to do that, in other cases we don't. George and I spoke a while ago about maybe one of the initiatives is to add a fee on top of our permit fee that would then, we would amass money that we would then use. People could write grants to build something on the property that they have. For example, if Ensenal School needed space, wanted to build on some of their property to put some, or remodel, to put some dorms in some of their buildings, that would be something that we could contribute to out of this fund. Or the college could build new dorms, or Menlo, you know, even Sacred Heart could expand something. So I just think that, I think we need to be creative, and I think that we need to, you know, possibly support people doing things that they're doing it on their property, not private residents that would change our general plan, but some of the quote-unquote commercial activities at schools and even the circus club. You know, they have people that need to have a, you know, one of the ranch hands that stays there with the horses or whatever. They needed to have a, you know, an apartment or something like that. I think that might be something that we might be able to do, where we're adding some sort of housing, and it's not a 5-story building, but I think we need to be open-minded and talk about it. Yeah, that's all.
Not here. Maybe just-
Yeah. So yeah.
I guess my thought is a slightly different twist, although I agree with everybody that what we have is not, the current pool is not acceptable. We've got to find something that gives us more input and more discretion. I get that. My thought, this issue for me really is one of sort of state versus local control, and you know where the right decision is to be made, and it's a power grab in many ways, in my view, by the state. And it hits us particularly hard because we are a unique community. And if they come in with a one-size-fits-all thing, it will dramatically change the nature of the community. It just will. And so I think it's very important that we are pretty aggressive in opposing what's out there currently. And also, I would say that, I don't know what the root of the problem is, the extent of the root of a problem, but a lot of this comes from the fact that we are creating massive numbers of jobs in some of these communities around us with no consideration about housing, as well as transportation, a whole list of other issues. And it would be, I don't know how you define what a community's fair share is, but it seems to me that a community's fair share ought to relate to, if they're the ones who decided to permit X many hundred thousands or millions of feet of commercial developments, that there's an obligation to include within that, I think, housing and some other things that should be part and parcel of it.
You're right.
And that's,
Exactly.
that's sort of getting passed away. I also just, when I ran for this position, one of the things I talked about is how important the unique character of this town is. Not part of the job. My job, if I was elected, was going to be to help preserve that character as much as possible. And so that's the way I would approach this. I would continue to try to preserve that character as much as possible.
Carrie?
Can I just add, just really, just
Sure.
one sentence?
Yeah, go ahead.
So whatever, housing that would be dictated that we would do, it wouldn't move the needle. It'd be such a small amount, right? I mean, whatever happened to it just wouldn't move the needle. I mean, look at, Brisbane is gonna double the size, their population. They've got a housing project that will literally bring in and house exactly the number of people that they have, and more than, sorry. Sorry, I apologize.
No, sir.
No.
Now, Carrie.
I'm
Yes, raise your stones.
waning in the eyes again. Not because you. I will tell you, I don't trust Senator Warner one bit. Wiener. I don't trust him one bit. I think that we all have seen a little bit of the independent analysis and so on and so forth. And I think another article of interest is Dave Price's article in the Post. Because 3 factors that are named are medium income, job rich, and good public schools. Well, hence we got a lot of public schools. As this relates to, and I think planning in general has a tendency to be poor. Like you say, we build projects and then we don't worry about the roadways, and then it's a consequence of the development. It should always be a condition of approval. If you're gonna build X thousands or tens of thousands of square footage, something should be applicable to fair housing, and how do we deal with the roadway conditions. But as far as with Senator Hill, this is in direct conflict with Senator Hill's proposal or his action in 2 lane tracks through the corridor with passing tracks. The numbers for estimates for Caltrain as of 2040 do not have anything in them related to what this bill is, and those numbers are already astronomical. The rail corridor as we know it today is going to be in the very near future. It's beyond its existing capacity. We're dealing with that now. Senator Hill's legislation says 2 lanes. Well, there's no way, if anything close to SB 50 comes into play, that there will be 2 lanes at the corridor. So there's not enough consideration or decisions. It's the cause and effect. I want you to do this, create the fair housing. But by the way, that rail corridor is gonna have to be 4 to 6 lanes in traffic to accommodate the amount of growth that I wanna project to create fair housing. It doesn't make sense to me to not address some of the problems it creates. We can just say, create the housing, but yet we're gonna use the rail corridor as the conduit. Well, wait a minute, what did you just do? You just now said 4 lane tracks. Who's gonna pay for that? Just the cost factor alone. And then why are we electrifying and doing what we're doing to the existing system if we're gonna blow it up with the SB bill as it's written, or anything remotely close to this is going to devastate the existing corridor. So I think those are some of the things that Senator Hill should become a little bit more aware, because it's the cause and effect. And why are we passing bills? Why are we moving forward related to Caltrain based on the business plan if something like this, as atrocious as this is written, does to a community? So, just my 2 bits.
A comment about the rail corridor and the building. If you look at what San Carlos is doing, okay, they have just built a tremendous housing corridor, literally along El Camino and along the rail and their train station. How is that gonna impact the ridership? And will it? There's no guarantee that those people are gonna be riding the train and commuting to San Jose instead of being on the freeway. I mean, just like what you said, they're gonna park on the streets.
You know, in San Francisco, when you ask about having things there, the borough with the the hub that is going to exist with all the connectivity, it makes sense for San Francisco.
Right.
And with the senator from San Francisco, that philosophy makes sense there. But as we come down this corridor, it starts to make less and less sense, because
frankly, I gotta get in my car just to get to Caltrain. So I start to make decisions, if it's gonna, as it is today, 15 minutes to get to the station, well, 15 minutes in the northern or southern direction makes more sense to me, so, you know,
We need to put a subway out by.
well, that's next,
I
so
think the
that's.
tram, the aerial tram,
Well, that would be
get them
neat.
off of the
That'd be
mountain,
neat.
just down.
Give me Elon Musk and a tube, I'll be okay.
Well, one of the things that, as Elizabeth brought up, I think it would be helpful if we could get kind of an update of our growth with regards to the housing element and any projections that Lisa can do. I mean, you're welcome to speak, you know, it'd be great if you gave us off the top of your head, but if you just get something through George to Elizabeth and I, it'd be better to talk from facts, you know.
Well, we have constructed 51 accessory dwelling units since since 2014.
And that's been,
But I can
there's
get
51.
all numbers for you.
Mhm.
51 accessory dwelling units. I mean, I don't know of any other community that's exempting the floor area to promote accessory dwelling units.
Right.
We have an aggressive program,
Mhm.
and it's working.
I
I
mean,
did
other-
also meet with Menlo School that's very interested in building teacher housing.
Yeah.
So we kind of did a site walk to see where that might work out for them.
That would make a lot of sense, I think, especially.
And I agree with that kind of promoting more the home sharing program. Have Human Investment Project does that, and that would be a great program
Yeah,
to
there's the
promote
flyer that
further.
goes around all the time. I don't know how many are in Atherton.
Yeah, I mean, there's billboards on the freeway that sometimes attract people's attention, but doing a little bit more promoting of that would be wonderful.
It's frankly, it's only gonna happen if there's economic motivation. If the state of California would make whatever rent someone gets, so long as it is rent within the definition of what is affordable rent, make it tax-free, you'd
Or
find
maybe it's
people.
a charitable contribution.
You'd find
tax
people
exempt.
that would start renting rooms and accessory buildings in the affordable range.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
My wife.
there's gotta be economic interest. That's what motivates people.
Provided it's long-term rental, not Airbnb.
Well, there's all kinds, yeah, that's right.
That's why, they're
very clear.
Okay. All right, okay. I think that's good,
Yeah,
excellent.
that's good.
All right, any other comments? We have this meeting on the 15th, and we'll give you a report when we get back.
Okay.
I'm glad you're doing that.
Well, thanks.
Thanks.
Enjoy your coffee.
There's no other public comment at this time, and so motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Just say, uh-oh, it's coming. Here it comes. The question, people have a hard time answering. That's my guess. That's my guess.